What's up, sister? Welcome back to the Period Whisperer podcast, the show helping perimenopause and menopause women de-stress your body and decode what it's saying to you so you can own your own health, energy, and weight loss again. If you're new, I'm so happy you're here. I'm Bria. I'm your host, a recovering people pleaser and hustle addict turned functional and holistic hormone specialist. Let's lean in and learn what your body is saying to you. Hey there, sister. This is it. This is part 4 of our 4-part mini-series, all on reigniting your spark in midlife. We have covered core values and life purpose. We've covered stress management and nervous system regulation. We have covered confidence. And in this one, we are bringing it all together with boundaries. And I want you to know that each of these things are things that I am actively working on for myself as well. They're kind of that intangible side that really fuel the foundational pieces of health that matter for our hormones and pack a huge punch. They make all the difference. So I'm here with you. I'm so glad you're here doing this with me and putting these steps into action. Let's get into boundaries with the amazing Michelle Fraley. And listen, make sure to follow her and to reach out if this is something that you like and could use more of. Let's go. All right. Hey there, sisters. Welcome back to the Period Whisperer podcast. It is part 4 of our 4-part mini-series of finding your midlife spark. And if you haven't been following along, I'm right here with you. And it's been a real beautiful journey. And I'm super grateful to have our amazing expert, Michelle Fraley, here with us to walk us through these steps. And I really have found in my own practices, just implementing these small things, that not only do I feel more sparky, but I'm able to see the things that have been getting in the way. And today, Michelle, I am actually really, really excited about this topic because I think this is one that I consistently work on with my therapist all the time, which is boundaries. So I'm going to just let you take it away because I think it's a big topic. It's an important one. I know a lot of the women listening struggle with this, but I'm looking forward to you even clarifying what this is for us, what boundaries.
Yes. Boundaries are something that come up just about daily when I'm working with clients, right? Because boundaries are really prevalent in our life, but something we still resist and have trouble identifying, maintaining, creating all of those things. But before I dive into boundaries, I just want to say, Bria, thank you not only for organizing this 4-part series for us to do together, but thank you for being such an active participant. I love watching you take notes while we're doing this. I love that you're doing the exercises with yourself, with your wife. And when you said it's even making me feel a little sparkier, that word was cute. And I also want to throw this out to women because I know a lot of women listening, they struggle with taking time for themselves, right? Sometimes they feel like, man, I'd love to do the exercises Michelle gave me, but it just feels luxurious or it just feels like I'm being selfish to do this. I want to tell you right now, when you are going out in the world with an understanding of your purpose and values, which was episode 1, when you're going out into the world with a more regulated nervous system with part 2, and when you're going out into the world as your unique, confident self, part 3, you're creating a ripple effect. You are essentially being a role model for the people in your life around these really important concepts. So for any women listening that are saying, oh, it really feels selfish to focus on self-care, keep in mind, you're doing a great service for the people in your life when you start showing up for yourself in these ways. When we take care of ourselves, that's when we can bring the best version of us to our families, to our friends, to our workplace.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I know for me, this story used to always be like, like the opportunity cost of what I was seeing, the opportunity cost of like taking time to do some of these things was I think just an incorrect opportunity cost. I really looked at it like, if I'm doing this, then I'm gonna fall behind on all the other little things that I'm doing. And for me, what I really recognized is when I was showing up is all in all these different ways, as you've taught us over the last 3 episodes, then I had more energy and I had more clarity and I could actually accomplish what I wanted to accomplish at a much faster and more efficient rate anyway. And I just felt better overall.
100%. I mean, this is so in line with so many of your podcasts, especially the ones you do solo, where you're presenting your wisdom. You often talk about working smarter, not harder, right? This idea that, hustling and pushing ourselves as hard as we can and micromanaging everything is actually overextending ourselves and probably detracting from the results that we want rather than giving us the results that we want.
Yeah.
Sometimes less is more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Often, I would say,
Yeah.
and certainly in perimenopause, less is more. That's where we get there. Anyways, what I will say.
Yeah, and that's why each of the strategies that I try to give with the concepts we talked about don't need to take 30 minutes or an hour, right? I'm asking people to do things that maybe take anywhere from 1 minute to 10 minutes,
Yeah.
right? We don't have to spend a lot of time to better ourselves and create a better world for the people around us.
I totally agree. And maybe I think sometimes it always helps for me to hear an example of how other people implement things. And because I like efficiency as best as I can, I really try to implement these things, in the pockets of my life where I'm also doing something else or where it's the most valuable time. So for the women listening, I'll implement these things on my morning walk. So I'm walking my dog, I'm getting my like circadian rhythm set, I'm getting my hormones set, and I'm thinking about some of the things you're talking about, and I'm doing the breath work. The 1 minute before I sit down to eat, I am taking that breath that we talked about, and regulating the central nervous system. And I'm supporting my hormones, and I'm digesting my food better. And at night, when sometimes I want to scroll on my phone and I know that that is going to mess up with my sleep, that's when I really take the time to do the journal prompts or have conversations with myself or do some of the tools and strategies you suggested in our last episode around confidence. So for those listening, if you need some clarity to get the most out of your life and efficiency, those are 3 great pockets that I can make happen while it's like you're getting a 2-fer or a 3-fer.
100%. Yeah, I did my breathing exercises while I made my bed this morning. And then I did a second round of breathing exercises while I was making my lunch today.
I was thinking about you talking about it with your coffee too the other. When I was making coffee the other day, I was like, well, I breathe while I brew.
Yep. While it brews, I breathe. All right.
Yeah, so there it is. I love it.
Let's dive into boundaries. All right. So the way I like to describe boundaries to people is that there's sort of the boundaries of the barriers, right? The fences, if you will, that we build in our relationship to protect our personal well-being. So boundaries are really designed to help us determine what's okay and what is not okay in a relationship. And despite popular belief, setting boundaries is not mean.
Yeah.
In fact, boundaries are what protect a relationship. Boundaries are what create a foundation of trust and safety in a relationship. Boundaries are what allow relationships to thrive, grow, and have longevity. I'll tell you right now, most people feel really uncomfortable with ambiguity. We don't want to guess what people want from us. We don't want to guess what makes people feel good or feel bad. We want to know, right? And so when we start clearly expressing our boundaries, what that really tells the other person is, I care about this relationship. I care about you enough to even perhaps have an awkward or a difficult conversation because I want our relationship to last.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one to highlight. I think it's a tough one to digest, but it's a good one to highlight.
hmm And I think people also get confused about boundaries because they look at boundaries as like this one singular concept. But there's really a lot of different types of boundaries. Like for example, we have physical boundaries,
Mhm.
personal space boundaries, how we want to be touched or not want to be touched, right? Think about it. Some people are sort of natural huggers, right?
Yeah.
So their physical boundary is, yeah, I'm okay with hugging people, even strangers. Other people will say, that doesn't really work for me. I'd rather not,
Yeah.
right? So physical boundaries is a huge boundary. Um, and I'm glad times have changed quite a bit. But as a therapist, it's always made me cringe a little bit when people force children to hug others,
Ah, yeah, definitely.
right? That's sort of sending the message that you don't have the right to create your own physical boundaries, right? It's okay if you don't want to hug, Aunt Nancy, you can give her a fist bump.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So another type of boundary we have is emotional boundaries,
Mhm.
right? This is how vulnerable we might get with somebody, how much personal information we share, how we express feelings and emotions to other people, and our boundary with accepting those, right?
Mm.
How does it feel to be around somebody who is very vulnerable or shares a lot of personal information, right? So that's another type of boundary. Another type of boundary is a material boundary, right? Sort of your stuff. Like, how do you feel about guests being in your home? Sort of using all of your being in your kitchen, using your bed. How does that make you feel? What about lending somebody your car?
Mm.
What about loaning out your favorite dress to a friend? I mean, we all have different boundaries around material things. We don't think about that. And then the last one is time oriented boundaries, right? How much time and energy or effort are we willing to put towards things,
Yeah.
right? Like watching somebody's children sort of on a whim for them,
Yeah.
or helping somebody move,
Yeah.
right? Are we willing to invest that amount of time? So, physical, emotional, material, and time oriented boundaries. Here's what is really important for people to know: you're going to have differences in
Mhm.
those boundaries with every different person in your life, right? Like my physical and emotional boundaries with my best friend are very different than they are with like the Amazon Prime delivery person,
Yeah.
right? They're just very different.
Yeah.
Also, what's super interesting is that all of these boundaries, even within the same relationships, can fluctuate, they can evolve. Like, for example, as a coach and therapist, clients' physical and emotional boundaries tend to be a lot different our first session than
Mm.
perhaps 6 months into working together,
Yes.
right? So keep in mind that these types of boundaries are going to shift and change, and that's completely normal. And it's all up to you. Your boundaries are not on trial. You
Mm.
do not have to be going around offering exhibits A, B, and C as to why your boundaries are your boundaries. They simply are.
Like that. Your boundaries
They
are not
sim
on trial.
they're not on trial. Okay. So we talked about sort of the four main categories of boundaries, but I also want to talk about um, three ways that you can approach these boundaries.
Okay.
The first way is rigid boundaries. So rigid boundaries are exactly what they sound like. They're extremely inflexible. Um, they actually distortedly keep us safe, but really what they do is they keep us disconnected.
Mhm.
They usually mean avoiding intimacy, avoiding any vulnerability. People with rigid boundaries might avoid asking for help, right? They might be overly independent. They may appear aloof or detached. They may not be people who want to help others because they feel like there's always going to be something they owe somebody.
Yeah.
right? So these are rigid boundaries, and they tend to make us feel lonely, right? There's this great quote. I want to say it was in a book by Young Pueblo, where he says, "Be careful that the walls you build for protection don't become your prison."
I've heard that one before. Oof.
Yeah, yeah. So the second way we can sort of express boundaries is the opposite of rigid, right? These would be porous boundaries. And just like rigid boundaries distortedly keep us safe, porous boundaries distortedly create connection,
Mm.
right? They create connection by putting your needs last, putting everybody above you. So these would be the people pleasers,
Mm.
right? The people who really struggle with saying no, even when they want to say no. This could even be accepting abuse or disrespect. Okay. So, of course, the last type of way we can approach boundaries is our goal, right? And this is to have healthy boundaries. People with healthy boundaries, they communicate effectively. What does effectively mean? It means clear. It means present minded, right? People with clear boundaries set boundaries in the present moment. They don't set boundaries 2 weeks later after something has happened.
Ah, interesting.
Okay. People with healthy boundaries, they share their feelings and their needs with others, understanding that it's not the other person's responsibility to manage those.
Ugh.
Yeah. And people with healthy boundaries are not only able to say no to other people, they're also able to accept no from other people without taking it personally.
I like this. These are really good, I don't know, tangible ways of, I think, recognizing where our boundaries are and maybe where boundaries are, in some of our relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because this doesn't go on the homework assignment, but you just gave me a good little light bulb moment for a homework assignment. And it may be to look at those four categories of physical, emotional, material, and time oriented, and kind of think about like where those show up in your life, or how would you describe your boundaries in those areas. And then again, you could take rigid, porous, and healthy and really look at, are there areas in your life where you are a little rigid? Keep in mind, you can also have rigid boundaries with yourself. Some
Mm,
people have rigid boundaries around their food intake, or rigid boundaries around an exercise schedule, or rigid boundaries around work, or rigid boundaries around spending,
yeah,
right? Boundaries, good. Rigid or porous, not as healthy.
right.
Okay. A common question I get about boundaries is, Michelle, what do I do when setting boundaries makes me feel guilty?
Oh, I want to know this answer. I want to know this answer.
Well, you might not like it because here's my answer. But
Okay, let's
but
hear it.
but honestly, here's my answer. When someone says, Michelle, what do I do when I feel guilty setting a boundary? You know what I tell them? Feel guilty.
Ah,
So feel guilty. Why do we give guilt so much power? You know what guilt is? Guilt is a temporary emotion. It's temporarily feeling uncomfortable. And we all know we do not want to make decisions based on temporary emotions.
yeah.
It is not worth, I mean, for those that haven't heard episode 1 about purpose and values, once you know what matters most to you, it is not worth pulling yourself out of alignment
Mhm.
of your values to avoid a temporary emotion.
Oh, easier said than done. But it's a good.
Yeah, it is. But remember, we get good at what we practice. If
Yes.
every single time we feel a twinge of guilt, we give in, we become a people pleaser, we put our needs last, what do we get good at? We get good at people pleasing. Boundaries are really about creating a balance of respecting and taking care of yourself
Mm.
in a way that can also feel like you're respecting and taking care of other people,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't have to mean that setting boundaries means I'm just going to walk all over everybody. It might feel like that at first when you've been a people pleaser for a decade or however long. It might feel like you're being really mean. But I'm going to tell you right now, we respect other people when they have boundaries.
Yeah.
We really do. We go, wow, that person really knows what they stand for. That person really has integrity. That person really stands up for themselves.
Yeah. You respect them more, don't you?
You do.
Yeah.
You do. So that's my strategy on dealing with guilt
Mhm.
is just deal with it.
Just
It's
do it.
okay. I mean, it honestly, you can even do a little bit of self-talk. Okay, I know I'm experiencing some guilt right now.
Yeah.
I know that experiencing guilt is very challenging for me and brings up a lot of feelings. I know I've felt this guilt before and I know it won't harm me and I know it won't last forever. And while I'm feeling guilt right now, I'm going to remind myself of why it's so important for me to respect me, why it's so important for me to align with my values so that I can really strengthen the integrity of the relationship I have with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. I think you've just given a lot of, I mean, you've certainly given me a really great tool to consider that part, which is probably the biggest challenge that comes up for me around setting boundaries is guilt.
It's just so interesting, right? And I mean, I was in that same boat until I had that light bulb moment that, guilt is just a temporary emotion like every other emotion. We don't have to give it all of our power. We can acknowledge it. We can, love ourselves and nurture ourselves through it,
Yeah.
but we don't have to attach to it and succumb to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
All right.
Okay.
Homework time.
I'm
Homework
excited.
time.
I've got my notes ready, Michelle. I'm so
Good, good.
excited.
So I'm going to do, as usual, 5 tangible ways that you can start sort of integrating this idea of creating healthy boundaries in your own life. Remember, boundaries are both interpersonal, right, with other people, and intrapersonal, right, with yourself. Okay. And sometimes they're even, I'll say it's with an entity too, like perhaps it's with a company, right? Time oriented boundaries, right? Sometimes we might have to set boundaries of, I'm just not going to check my email after 9.
Yeah.
Okay. So here we go.
Okay.
First thing, we need awareness before we have anything else. So I just want you to take an inventory of things that you're saying yes to, that you're investing energy into, that are creating friction within yourself or within your relationships. What are you saying yes to? And I want people to understand it doesn't have to be somebody asked you to do something and you're saying yes. Sometimes that yes is more of an assumption, right? Like I might have a mom who says, you know what? It really creates friction for me that I'm still packing my kids' lunches every day. They're in high school and I'm packing. And I'll even ask, like, do your children ask you? Well, no, I mean, I just assume I need to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So they're saying yes to something that actually they weren't even asked to do.
Oh, so good.
Right.
It's so
Yeah.
true.
So I want you to start with that inventory. And number 2 really gets on this a little bit more, but I want you to start with an inventory of what you're saying yes to that is creating friction within yourself or within your relationships. Number 2, boy, people are going to feel like I am throwing darts at them with this one, but it's got to be said. I want you to be honest with yourself and start creating awareness around your tendency to overfunction for others.
Oof.
Do you tend to step in and rescue or take responsibility for things that are not your responsibility?
Uh,
only to feel overwhelmed, overworked, and resentful later. I have worked with countless women, especially women, over the years who have been over functioning for their children, for their partners for years, right? And we've all heard we teach people how to treat us.
Yeah.
What happens is at first this over functioning feels really good, right? It gives us a sense of purpose. We feel like we're in control. Look, everything is running so smoothly. If you want something done right, do it yourself. But eventually, what happens, especially in this perimenopause stage, when perhaps we're losing a little bit of energy or our hormones are going all over the place, we need to direct a little bit more energy towards other things. We start getting resentful.
Yeah.
We start getting frustrated and going, why is nobody else doing any of these things? Why is nobody else noticing this mess on the dining room table? Why is nobody else getting the mail? Why is nobody else taking the dog out?
Yeah.
You know why? Because when you're an over functioner, you create a little army of under functioners.
I want to crawl into my bed hearing you say this. I know this was a problem that I used to struggle with. So I'm happy to be on the other side of it most of the time, but the
Yeah,
problem is real. The struggle is real. When you are an over functioner, you create an army of under functioners.
you
That's,
do.
yeah.
You do. You surround, you teach people, I mean, in some, right, sometimes even these people who are under functioning will try to function, and the over functioner will step in and say, nah, you're not going to function correctly. You're going to function too slowly. I'm just going to over function here.
Oh my goodness.
So that's my prompt for you is I really want you to have an honest conversation about your tendency to overfunction. Maybe it's not in every area. Maybe at home you're not an overfunctioner, but you're an overfunctioner at work,
Yeah.
taking care of everything,
Yeah.
right? Okay. The third step, right? You can tell because I've talked about her even in my last or no, when we talked about stress management, but Dr. Kristen Neff and her work around self compassion. Self compassion is just so incredibly important. So here's the prompt for you. Are you giving yourself the same permission to say no and take care of your needs that you give to other people in your life? Right? Like I know for myself, if I had a happy hour scheduled with some of my best girlfriends and something came up for them, or they just weren't feeling it and they wanted to reschedule, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah.
I'd give them permission to do that. I'd say, sure, no problem. I understand.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. We'll catch up next week.
Yeah.
Do I give myself the same permission to show up for my needs? Or do I sort of bully myself into going along with it in order to please others?
Yeah.
Recognizing, remember when I talked about confidence, I said the value lies in your energy. When we say yes to things we mean no to, what do you think our energy's like?
Oh, that must completely changes it, doesn't it? I know I've done that so many times in my life where I'm like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I don't. And then what does that say about me? What is the energy I'm putting out there for?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's the prompt, right? Are you giving yourself the same permission to say no or show up for your needs that you give others?
Okay.
All right, here's a behavior step for people. Woo, man, I'm coming in hard with the boundaries ones today,
Yeah.
but they're important. This is almost, I'm going to invite people. I'm not going to say challenge. I'm going to invite people to try this for a week. And that is to avoid over explaining or over apologizing your boundaries.
Mm.
Listen, so I said avoid over explaining and over apologizing. You may explain and you may apologize if that feels sincere, right? Talking about the happy hour example again with girlfriends. If something came up and I couldn't make the happy hour, I may reach out to a friend and say, I'm really sorry that I have to cancel tonight, but unfortunately, I found out my daughter has a choir concert that I need to attend. Okay. I apologized once because I sincerely would have liked to have gone to the happy hour. And I explained because I felt it was appropriate to let them know that, something else came up, and what came up was really valuable to me,
Yeah.
right? Watching my daughter sing. I don't need to say it 10 or 20 more times.
Yeah.
I don't need to text everybody again. I'm so sorry, you guys. I really feel bad about this. I wish I could do both. We don't need to do that. I'm going to tell you the biggest reason why. Because when we do that, we're watching ourselves. We're teaching ourselves. We're sending ourselves the message. I need permission. I need validation to set boundaries and show up for myself. No, you don't. No, you don't. You get to choose that going to the choir concert was higher on your values than the happy hour.
Yeah.
You get to choose that. It's not on trial.
Yeah. It's not on
Yeah.
track.
So practice for just 1 week. See how it feels to avoid over explaining and over apologizing. It's kind of like you add over in front of anything, and we get the law of diminishing returns, right? Thinking good, overthinking,
Not so
not
good.
so great, right? Yeah.
What I think is so interesting as you're talking about this is that I'm very aware of that there are areas of my life where I am quite comfortable and confident setting boundaries in. And, there are areas in my life, like with my children or my parents, where it's a struggle where it almost goes out the window, where I have more of that guilt or more of those things come in. So it's almost interesting to pay attention to that.
Last homework assignment. This is a mindset shift. And luckily, I'm so glad that we saved boundaries for the last, because people, I think by now, know that I'm coming at them with nothing but love, because this is a hard truth. And here it is. Your homework assignment is to start accepting the truth that sometimes setting boundaries means you're going to disappoint other people. There you have it. There you have it. Dropped on you just like a ton of bricks. We all know that you cannot please 100% of the people 100% of the time. And if you try to do that, you are completely living an insincere and inauthentic life to yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes when you set boundaries, people are going to be just fine with them.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you set boundaries, like I said, it's going to create a sense of safety, trust, clear expressed expectations. Great. That can feel really good. Sometimes you're going to set a boundary, a time oriented boundary, a material boundary, whatever type of boundary, and it's going to disappoint people.
Yeah.
It's going to disappoint people that you weren't up for house guests this weekend. It's going to disappoint people that you weren't willing to lend them your vehicle for the weekend, right? It's going to disappoint people that maybe you didn't want to hug. It's okay. It's all right. You know what I've learned about disappointment? Same thing I've learned about guilt. It's a temporary emotion.
I'm going to remember this. I am going to remember this. And I hope all the women listening are going to remember that too. It is temporary. And since life goes faster and faster these days, that temporary is smaller and smaller.
Absolutely. So there you have it. There is our chat today about boundaries. We know a little bit more on how to define boundaries. We know that they are ever evolving and ever changing in our relationships and with ourselves. And you got some homework assignments, some tough homework assignments, some of them about awareness, some of them about taking action, and some of it about shifting our mindset and perspective around boundaries.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This has been invaluable. I know that the women listening are going to have taken a lot of things away. And, we really talk about this, we put together this series, you put together your part around, reigniting this midlife spark. And it wasn't, it's with a lot of thought, because not only, is this so relevant to the areas you spoke about, to actually stoking that fire and allowing us, but this podcast is all about, this transition in our life, and each one of these areas that you have really given us tangible things on massively impacts our hormones. And it's not just about what we eat or how we move. It has so much to do with our experience in this world, and the tools you've given us have really created amazing steps, I think, to implement. So I really can't thank you enough so much for doing this.
Well, I can't thank you enough for creating a space for women who are in this season of their life to feel heard, to feel seen, to provide valuable education. I've been listening to your podcast from the very beginning, which is how we connected. And I've loved listening to your solo podcast, and I've loved the other educators and inspirers and mentors that you've had on. So thank you for creating this space, because I think community is important. And I know you and I have even talked about, is there a way or a desire for people to create perhaps a community with us for some further exploration, whether virtual or in person?
Yes, exactly. And I wanted to talk about that. So for anyone, two things. For anyone listening, actually, I have three things. For anyone listening, Michelle just reached out to me as someone listening to the podcast, and we've connected on such a great level and been able to build our community together around this stuff. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We're all people here, and we're all in this together. And I think the more we can connect just as human beings, the further we can grow. If this has interested you, if you have loved this as much as I have, if it has touched you or resonated with you, please share it. And please reach out to one of us, either on Instagram or to our emails. I'll put them in the show notes below, and let us know. Let us know if this is something you want to hear more of, you want to learn more about, so that we can consider that as we move forward. And because I've been so obsessed with all four of this mini series, I am going to put together, if with Michelle's permission, a document that has all of these homeworks all together for you, so that you can grab them really quickly. If you were on the go when you were listening, download them and have them there, and know how to reach out to us if you need us. So swipe up to the show notes, share this episode, grab your downloadable down there, and go out, be more in your life, and not just less on a scale. And now you have more tangible tips on how to do that. We'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me on the Period Whisperer podcast. If you liked this episode, take 30 seconds right now to write a review on iTunes, and then reach out to me directly on Instagram at Bria_period_whisperer, and message me there with a screenshot of your review. As a thank you, I will give you a customized free hormone audit to get you on your way to the best health of your life in midlife.